Hey, good evening and welcome to Rominger Radio, broadcasting live to talk about Ebola. Excuse me. Hoping to get on a carrier patient who is ensconced here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. At least that's what I believe. He seems to be bleeding out of his eyeballs. And in all seriousness, though, Ebola is in America now, right? It is brought here by the very CDC. It was brought here for no other reason than to treat Americans who've gone over and tried to treat other people. And, of course, the real purpose, I think, is bring back some Americans and let's experiment on them. Let's see how the Ebola progresses. Let's have them in a super modern medical facility so we can learn as much as we possibly can. I really want tonight's show to be about what you guys think's going on with Ebola, 717-916-5189. So if you want to Skype into the show here and tell us what the hell's really going on here in America, 717-916-5189. What is Ebola? Well, it's a virus. It's a virus that originated somewhere near lake or river, I should say, River Ebola in the continent of Africa, originally the country of Zaire. I think it's the Congo or something now. African nations tend to change names the same way some people change spouses. That said, of course, that was something about shedding that colonial problem. So I guess I can't blame them. Again, 717-916-5189. No, I just had a little achy cough or something here, you know. I promise you I'm not bleeding from the gums yet. Well, in the morning I do when I brush my teeth, but that's healthy. It's different than just bleeding from your gums when you walk around the street when you have Ebola. Anyhow, Ebola originated in Africa, and who knows where or what the original carrier species is. It's believed that the eating of bush meat. And no, Don Stevens, it's not what you think it is. Bush meat is, in fact, what comes from the bush. And so these guys go out and hunt, gals, whatever, mainly men, I guess. They go out and they hunt and they catch whatever they can. And it could be, you know, a 3-inch salamander, or a 15-foot crocodile, or a little furry monkey. Doesn't really matter. Whatever they can find to get their hands on, it's brought back and traded. And in America we had this. I mean, many years ago, ducks, for instance, were hunted almost to the point of extinction by commercial hunters. The commercial harvesting of wildlife for sale in the city markets was a proud tradition here in America until we pretty much killed off everything. Well, in Africa, they've got enough jungle and wildlife in a lot of areas that there's still a bushmeat industry. They haven't successfully killed off everything yet. So it's believed that eating some of this bushmeat has, in fact, caused people to become infected with the Ebola virus. I guess it's an Ebola or an Ebola. I don't know if there's one or the other, if there's a group of Ebola or a single is different, like a geese or a goosling. Basically reminds me of John Gosling. The point being, though, that it jumped into human populations periodically over the years now, mainly in remote rural areas where containment has been very successful. We've all seen the movies that begin with, you know, the villagers somewhere and then the large thermobaric weapon dropping on them and evaporating the village to prevent the outbreak. Well, that's no longer an option. The Ebola virus has spread to Liberia and Nigeria and a host of other countries who've never had the problem before. So it's on the move. And why is this important? Well, the movement of Ebola, the Ebola virus is very important because it could potentially jump here to the United States. And I mean jump here not in a controlled medical environment. It's dangerous enough, you know. And listen, the CDC recently, right, we discovered that they're through some lax protocols, accidentally might have exposed people to anthrax, and through some other lax protocols might have, you know, accidentally dosed somebody with something else. Well, I don't think they're going to do that with Ebola, right? I don't think so. But they brought Ebola into the United States, and if they make a breach of protocol, if they screw it up, if somebody gets infected and brings it into the general community, well, that's a risk. Like I said, I don't think that's going to happen. The real risk is areas like Nigeria, which are really quasi-first world countries that interface directly with third world countries. You know, half the country's first world, half the country's third world. I guess that averages out to a second world country. Well, am I just blowing smoke here? No, it looks like information that it may have jumped from Nigeria to Saudi Arabia now. A guy shows up in Saudi Arabia and falls over dead at the hospital. And what are we thinking it is? We're thinking it might be Ebola. Liberia has just declared a state of emergency over it. That's the World Health Organization, not Doctor Who. WHO is trying to figure out what to do about whether or not to declare a national health or international health emergency. And they're considering using medicines or treatments that are not currently approved for the treatment of patients with Ebola. I mean, you can't even get cancer patients treated with unapproved patients. Why are they taking these stabs in the dark? Because they can see the writing on the wall. And it may not happen this time, but it will happen eventually. But it could happen this time. In fact, it's as close to it happening as ever before. If Ebola makes the jump, to the United States, if Ebola makes the jump to Europe, if Ebola makes the jump to certain areas of Asia, any largely populated areas, mass panic's going to ensue. There was a guy in New York City Hospital the other day. They quarantined, still waiting to hear, last I knew, whether or not he had Ebola. I don't know if he did or not. There's some chance that he did. Some chance that he didn't. But nonetheless, he had recently been in West Africa. And he had symptoms consistent with Ebola. Now, of course, they're telling us that a lot of diseases are consistent with Ebola. Here, and one of our followers here at the show, one of our regular followers, Dawn, had posted on my Facebook page an article about how people who are into conspiracy theories have a certain trust issue and a psychological issue and all that. And I don't disagree with that article entirely. I don't believe everything's a grand conspiracy, and I can accept that things happen through no human agency or human control, but by mere chance whatsoever. But I know from reading, I know from studying the actual government documents that, for instance, had there been a nuclear war, I don't know what they say right now, but I know what the declassified ones say. Had there been a nuclear war, the official plan was not to notify the population. The belief was that the mass exoduses from major cities would have caused more harm than good. So, for instance, 3 nukes are launched. You believe you know which cities they're going to. You announce it. You tell people to evacuate. Maybe a few people get out of those cities, but your overall casualties and your overall problems of people not sheltering in place amongst cities that weren't affected and amongst cities that were affected far outweighs just taking the hit and letting the civilian population absorb it. So, do I believe it's possible that somewhere, someplace, somebody has written down on a piece of paper the following? In the event that the Ebola virus is truly moving through the population, we should A, minimize the danger, B, point out that it's not easy to transmit, parenthesis, well, it is actually, but we'll stick to the party line, end parenthesis. We will pretend that there are experimental treatments in the works that can be brought up to bear at any moment to continue to give people hope. And we will not tell people when we know where it is because we don't want to create unnecessary mass panic from urban areas. I mean, if we announce that this guy in New York has Ebola, I'm sure this isn't on the paper, right? But if in the city where the infection is found, it is announced publicly immediately, mass transit will gridlock and people will flee the city and potential carriers will remove themselves. See, that's the real issue. So we don't really want to alert the city at large to evacuate that there's a real problem because that'll just disperse the carriers. See, here in America, we don't have strong border controls, do we? If you want to leave New York City, and get upstate New York, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I don't care where you want to go, you'll pretty much just walk or drive out of the city. Now, of course, if you discover Ebola in the city and you're the military, the CDC, FEMA, whoever you are, and you are prepared, what are you going to do? You're going to cordon off the city quietly, and you're going to make your announcement after you have your troops in place and your things in place to actually prevent the mass exodus and require people to shelter in place, but not allow them carrier monkeys to flee and move across the land and carry the disease to 5 more cities. Of course, you hope that works. We know from what's going on in Africa, that the populace does not cooperate with these things. Now, they're not cooperating for many reasons that you and I probably would cooperate, but nonetheless, they're not cooperating generally with what's going on. By the way, if you want to get in on this conversation, if you have some feelings about Ebola, I mean, if you're in love with Ebola, if you've known somebody with Ebola, the talk line number is 717-916-5189. If you want to see a picture of the Ebola virus, I have it at carlrominger.com, by the way. It's KarlRominger.com. Looks like a little shepherd's staff or some such thing. 717-916-5189 if you want to get in on the talk. And I would love to know what you guys are thinking because, I mean, what are you going to do? I want to know. The guys from New York come rolling down. You know, the Ebola hits New York and people come running our way. What are we doing? What are you doing? That's what I want to know. Are we fending them off? Are we welcoming them in? What exactly are we going to do? So, if you have an opinion, I'd love, like I say, love to know it. I don't know. Maybe some people don't have any opinion on Ebola. Maybe most of you don't have any thoughts at all. That's quite possible. Maybe my Skype's not working. You can't get through because I haven't heard from Dwayne or Dawn or Lucinda, which is a pretty good indicator that the Skype might be down. That's just my theory. And Gigi, of course. Gigi, where are you? Those are my 4 callers, by the way. You know, I have occasional extra caller, you know. But in all seriousness, I'd like to know what you guys are thinking. I mean, are you following this? Do you think it's a real crisis? Do you think I should be hyping it up as much as I am? Or do you think I'm just making much ado of nothing? Maybe I am making much ado of nothing. I don't know. Maybe I am. I don't think I am, though. I really believe that Ebola is an issue. You know, the World Health Organization is running at a deficit right now. And it turns out that the big responders are Doctors Without Borders. They've got like 600 people over there in Africa working away at this problem. And they need help. They need real help. By the way, tonight's broadcast is brought to you in part by Monk's Cafe Flemish Sour Ale, or at least the palate wetting part of the broadcast is. You know, our official sponsor is still One Wipe Charlie's. But seriously, if you want to get in here, tell me what you think. I really want to know. I want to know what America thinks about Ebola. Is it a problem? Is it a fear? Will historians someday listen to this radio broadcast and say, if only everybody had listened to Carl? I'd like to think that would be the case. Well, not in that context. Caller, you're on the air.
Carl, yeah, things have really changed with the Ebola crisis this week.
Yeah, tell me what's going on, brother.
Well, I mean, your summary of it is correct. The original vector that we discussed last week came from Sierra Leone, was a finance minister, crossed through, I believe, Liberia, Sierra Leone, to where did he eventually?
Was it Lagos, Nigeria, or?
Yeah, in Lagos, and then died in the vicinity of Lagos. Now, we seem to have vectors in the United States, Saudi Arabia, and scares in South America and as far away as China. But those are just scares.
And vector, by the way, for people who don't know, a vector is something that carries a disease. And so a rat, for instance, is a vector which carries the fleas, and the fleas are the vector which carries the plague. So I was hoping Kate would call in tonight. She's a medieval expert. Perhaps she could enlighten us on all things medieval, corsets and all those sorts of things. But I was really hoping she could get down here and tell me about the plague. But in all seriousness, a vector is really something that carries a disease. And so when you call a person a vector, what you're basically saying is they're carrier monkey, as I like to say.
Yeah, anything that is carrying the live disease. And actually, I think the vector more specifically refers to not just the carrier, but the description of the trip or the trajectory or the history of the trajectory of the carrier of the disease. And it can be something inanimate, too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's concerning. So we have 2 U.S. doctors being treated with experimental vaccine developed from, it's an antiviral compound developed from tobacco.
Yeah,
and
well, I think
supposedly it has an efficacy level that is reportable in the mainstream media.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because efficacy and safety, I mean, as you know, efficacy and safety are 2 separate questions. And efficacy quite often, is something that we learn more about through long trial and error. And given the fact that there haven't really been too many humans infected with Ebola, I can't imagine that we have any meaningful statistics on actual human cure rates or efficacy and mitigation of death rates in human beings. I mean, I really don't think they can have that. They may be using monkey models or rat models.
Well, they do have, according to the studies when it came out, going back to the book The Hot Zone, when he was reporting on the Marburg virus in 1978, that particular virus was wiping out small towns so fast that the entire town would be destroyed before it was able to be disseminated anywhere else outside of the town. And they were able to contain it in the town. And they had quarantined that, taken samples of that, and those samples had been shipped around and had been contained in research facilities, including places in the U.S. But since then, there have been several outbreaks, but those outbreaks have been fast. They burn fast and have been localized.
Right.
But what we're looking at now is probably multiple strains of the Ebola virus of unknown
excuse me, I'm just
not
wiping
sure what the word is.
I'm just unknown origin or unknown mutation, or I'm just wiping the blood.
Yeah, unknown origin, right. So they can't necessarily categorize it with the original virus, and they can't classify it, they can't describe it, and they can't effectively compare their notes, compare it against how they were treating it previously.
Well, real problem is wait till it goes airborne. Wait till it mutates to airborne status. Then I'm moving to a hole in the ground somewhere. You know what I mean?
Well, it's true. I mean, but at the same time, none of that has been confirmed, and so much information is going to be spread around through mainstream media, through the underground internet, through word of mouth, and people are just going to be scared about infection in general because of the Ebola scare.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be hard to determine what is Ebola and what people.
Well, right, but here's
what is just common illness.
Here's the next question: when Ebola does make it out of the fences here in America if it does. Can we trust the government to tell us, and how fast?
No, absolutely not.
Right, that's the problem.
I don't think there is total disclosure of knowledge of any kind of pandemic like Ebola in real time from the government. Not total disclosure, not whatsoever. It's going to be systematically disseminated through a series of channels in order to line up the information so that it creates as little panic as possible.
Well,
it's probably laid out on a matrix somehow in a strategic kind of way.
I'm waiting to see what happens.
All right, Carl. So I'm going to let you go, but a very interesting development this week for sure.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, this is not the last time we had an outbreak. I remember it. It sort of just died off. It's now moved into major urban areas, which means, and we have a 20-some day incubation period, 2 to 20-some days, which means a whole bunch of people could have been infected 15 days ago and still be asymptomatic, folks. They could have been infected 15 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and be asymptomatic. Think about that. So the guy who, and now of course they're telling us, I say they're telling us, again, I'm not sure. Is it true? Is it true? I don't know. They're telling us that you're not contagious while you're asymptomatic. Well, last time you get fired if you don't go to work because you have the flu. I don't feel well. I don't come to work. I don't come to work. I don't feel well. Yeah, guess what happens? It's called unemployment. Welcome to the world of work, folks. So, the people are not going to curtail their activities. Guys that are feeling a little under the weather, they meet a nice girl. They're going to tell her they have a sore throat before they stick their tongue down their throat. No, they're not. Let's just be realistic about how the world really works. This virus is going to be hopping and hopping and hopping and making hops and making more hops, and we're not going to know who has it immediately, and they're not really locking stuff down. I have grave concern. I have absolutely grave concern. I don't think I'm crazy about this. You can call me crazy. Anybody else want to weigh in on the Ebola virus? I'm happy to take your calls. If you guys don't want to talk about Ebola and you want to call me about something else you think is more important, something that Miley Cyrus did, something that Billy Ray Cyrus did, I don't know. If you think that's more important, call me about that. 717-916-5189. I would love to have a discussion with you about Miley Cyrus or Billy Ray or Justin Bieber. Really, what could be more important than them when we have Ebola breathing down our backs? Of course, some of you, my true tinfoil hat wearing friends, have opined that Ebola is just a convenient way of taking immigration out of the news. All right, those of you who think that is the case, call in now, 717-916-5189, because you don't call in, it must not be true. I'm allowed to say to you, too, if you're so damn paranoid that you believe that they're making up Ebola simply to take immigration out of the news, I think you've been drinking a little bit too much Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid. Cool. How do you say? It's like whipped. Cool. So many different ways to say a word. I'm just fascinated by that. It's like whipping. You say it's like whipping cream, so it's like Kool-Aid, cool. I don't know. Anyway, you see what I'm saying. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. And if you're drinking the Kool-Aid, I have some sympathy for you, but not a lot. Because it really, trust me, is not a big, it is not really a big, it's not really a big, terrible thing where the government is using Ebola to hide immigration problems. Okay, we have immigration problems. We've talked about those before. Of course, Israel's quieted down. We don't need to talk about that tonight. But Ebola is certainly a concern, and it is a rising problem here in America. Now, I am going to do my prerogative here because I've talked for about half an hour about Ebola, and it's a very depressing topic. And I'm sure you guys don't want to talk about it all night. But if you want to talk about Ebola, now's your chance to call in. 717-916-5189. I'll get you live on the air. We can hear what your thoughts are. But if you don't have anything to say about it, in the next 3 or 4 minutes, then I'm going to exercise my prerogative and end the show. And why not? I think I've got the point across. I think we need to be vigilant. I think we need to be questioning. We need to be paying attention to what is going on. We need to know where and why, who and when, how and whatever. I don't know. All I know is I am actually fairly concerned that this Ebola crisis could erupt. You know, I have a son, little guy. I love him to death, and I'm going to have him this weekend, and we are going to have a great time together. But boy, I would heaven forbid the world fall apart in his lifetime. That just scares the hell out of me. All right, caller, you're on the air. What's going on?
Hey, Carl.
What's going on?
How you doing? How you doing, man?
Good, Dwayne. How are you?
Good. Hey, first off, I've been I look at Drudge Report every day.
Yeah.
And tell you what, after looking at Drudge the last couple of days, I think there's more than you out there concerned because I don't know. The way I'm taking it, this could be a problem. This could be a real problem.
It's scary, man. It's scary.
I mean, Drudge, some of his reporting was like, yeah. I mean, we better just not hope it goes away magically because it might not. You know, it might actually come and haunt us. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I don't have the knowledge of it that you do, so, you know, I just don't know much about it. Other than it can wipe out a lot of people real quick, you know?
Well,
if you let it get out of hand.
If in fact we do lose 1 billion people to Ebola, I assume I will be allowed to drive an SUV and we'll stop worrying about global warming.
Well, I'm not quite worried about global warming, but I could probably be worried about Ebola more than I could be worried about that.
Well,
you know.
And Don, are you on with us? Is that who else I got on here? Don? Who else is on here with Dwayne?
Oh, is Don with us?
Somebody's with us. I get somebody up here, but they're not talking.
Oh.
I don't know. I answered another call after you, but I don't know. He's not talking. He probably called in and then put his phone on mute or something. Who knows? All right. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So
anyway.
So, Dwayne, have you heard anybody else have any fears about Ebola? I mean, besides Drudge, anybody you know in your personal life, or does it still seem like it's not on anybody's radar?
No, I haven't run into any of it. You know, I basically run a public place of business, so I see a few people every day, but no, I haven't personally run into anything. But like I said, Matt Drudge is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And
I feel like this story is running under the radar, and it's not running under the radar for lack of press coverage. It's just not something people want to deal with.
Well, how do you, I mean, you know, I guess the answer is how do you deal with it? I mean, I was always under the impression that when you had an outbreak like that, you quarantine.
Right.
But
well, let me tell you how I'm going to deal with it. Let me tell you how you're going to deal with it. You ready?
Yeah.
Load your guns. Stock up on your fresh water and your food. And if things fall to hell, be prepared to shoot anybody who wants to come in your door. And make sure you got enough fresh, clean water and food that you're not dependent on going out and getting in contact with anybody. I mean, that's what you got to do. You're going to lock yourself in hermetically. Now, if it goes airborne, we got a different story. But otherwise, you just seal it in and you just shoot the zombies in the street. And that may sound terrible, but I'm telling you right now, that's the first thing I did, man. I was like, I check my guns, make sure my ammo's good, got my MREs, I'm ready to go. And some people be like, oh, you're crazy survivalist. But no, I'm telling you right now, if Ebola gets hit, and if they discover some guy with Ebola at the emergency room in New York City and the word gets out, those carrier monkeys are going to get on the highway and drive towards Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm not taking them in. I'm shooting them. Right. I'm shooting them at my door before they get in. Right? I'm not letting the government quarter anybody with me. I'm not, and I'm certainly not going to volunteer anywhere. Listen, I don't want to die. It's just kind of like a little bugaboo of mine. And I want to protect my son from it, and to the extent he's trying to protect his mother as well. So, I'm just thinking out loud. But
right.
But I think
that might be good sound advice for everybody. I mean, I always try to keep 30 days.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of where I've always been for the last whole bunch of years. You know, can we make it for 30 days? Yeah, I think we can, you know.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, by the way, is water. Remember that. You can go a long time without food, but boy, you go through a lot of water as a human being. We're like cattle when it comes to water. I mean,
you could buy beer too. That would take you through.
It's true, but you got to have a lot. I mean, think about it for a minute. Like but in all seriousness, it does take a lot of water. I mean, you got to think. You can't think in quarts or gallons. You got to think in tens or hundreds of gallons of water to make it through a long period of time. And that takes a little bit of commitment because most of us think about the modern house. Where in your house do you have a cistern? Right? We don't have cisterns anymore, right?
Right.
When I was a kid, under the front porch was an old cistern. What the hell was that? Well, that's where they put the damn water when it came up. You know, they had a cistern full of water because water wasn't free. Water didn't come through pipes. And
I grew up in an old farmhouse, and yeah, we got one.
Yeah, well, exactly. But we don't have that anymore. You know, I'm looking at. I have a pot that holds like 5 gallons of water. What is that? A 20-quart pot or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got another big stainless steel tub that I can put some water in. After that, I got to put in my bathtub. Well, what does that mean? It means I'm not going to be showering during this whole crisis.
Right. Yeah, and storing water that takes up a lot of space. You know, I mean, especially a 30-day supply.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do.
Then multiply it by 4 or 6 or 8 people, depending on the size of your family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you start to realize why you might not want to keep extra people around the house.
Yeah, it's almost the food's almost the easy thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
It goes your storable long-term food and stuff goes takes up a little space on some shelves, and boom, that's done there. You know,
food's easy because it's the human body's need for food is a little bit more malleable than your need for water, okay?
Right.
I'm just going to venture a guess that you and me, Dwayne, have probably about an extra 2 weeks food supply hanging on our bellies.
Yeah, I could probably go for a little while.
Right. And so, we can really, you can go quite a long period of time without a steady diet. I mean, it's going to be hell for modern people like us who've just eaten every day of our lives. But still, water, what is it, 4 days without water? And you're a goner.
Right. And the other thing that I got to worry about, and so do you to a point, is, you got 1 kid, I got 3.
Right.
And I know one thing, man, you don't stop, 3 and 5 year old kids from eating.
No, you can't. And the other thing, people don't think about this, but this is also where you got to learn that you don't just flush your urine down the toilet. And people are going to laugh at me for saying that, but you need to start preserving the water. And I'm not advocating drinking the urine because you need to build a little solar still and turn it back into fresh drinking water. But there's a lot of things you can do. Now, of course, how do you build a solar still while you're barricading yourself in your house? Keeping the Ebola zombies away. I don't know. I mean, that gets a little more complicated by itself. It's not a survival in the wilderness situation. It's maybe survival for me, particularly. I live right in Carlisle. It's survival in an urban environment. And again, I know people are going to be like, "Oh, he's ridiculous." No, it's not ridiculous because when it happens, like when Katrina happened, right? I'm sure there was a couple guys sitting down there in New Orleans who were like, "Yeah, I'll be fine. We'll just wait for the waters to recede."
Right. Well, they have no electric, no water, no sewage, no nothing, no utilities, no nothing.
Right. But I'm sure there was a few guys down there who said, "You know what? I can weather this because I'm ready." But it's a different mindset, and you have to be prepared to do what's necessary.
Right.
That was my plan for Y2K. I just bought more ammunition.
And and I have yet to find that I never had too much ammo.
You can never have too much ammo. Yeah. That's true.
No, never. I keep looking at it. It's like, is that enough? Nah, it needs a little more yet.
You can never have too much horsepower. You can never have too many beautiful women. You can never have too much whiskey. The list goes on and on.
Well, the horsepower thing I sure understand. The beer thing I understand. I'm married 30 years. I better watch on the women thing.
Well, your wife, obviously, your wife's just so beautiful that you're just, you're smitten and it's all.
Oh, absolutely,
right.
Carl.
See, there you go.
Absolutely.
See? Easy.
There you go. So anyhow, I know you want to cut this all short.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, it's kind of a depressing subject, but I hope the word gets across. And like I say,
you want to change it for a couple of minutes?
Yeah. Go ahead. Shoot.
Do you remember I said to you that I had something I wanted to throw at you?
All right, throw away whatever you need.
It has nothing to do with Ebola, and change the subject completely. I live in a township here, in West Idle Township here, and I've lived here for quite a while. And I don't know, call me active. I go to some meetings, and I try to keep up with what's going on. And we've had this supervisor here in this township, and I'm going to just say, all my life, the staunch Republican that just seems like he can't not get elected every time. And my views on him, I mean, this is my opinion, but I think he's just a snake in the grass. A couple little things about him. His father is the single largest landowner within the township, and it just seems like every time his dad or him want to do something, they just get it done, which I don't care. But here a couple of years ago, well, first off, when he was running for re-election, he used the township secretary and the color copier to do his campaign flyers.
Well, that would be mildly illegal, wouldn't it?
And got caught. And, but it's okay. I just paid the township back and everything's all hunky-dory. And prior to that, years ago, he was physically caught red-handed using township equipment, backhoes, dump trucks, rollers, whatever, all the stuff, because he has keys to all the garages, using on the weekends and evenings for his own personal gain, working on his own personal properties, amongst, I could go on and on about other things that he's done. And years ago, he was turned into the Pennsylvania State Board of Ethics, or whatever you call it. Okay, I'm not going to be accurate. You probably know more about that than me. But it's supposed to be a state agency that you would report officials to that you feel are acting unethically. So anyway, this went around for a while. And one day, I got an email, and somebody sent me the 27-page official report from the Pennsylvania State Ethics Commission.
Yeah, that's the correct body, yep.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm not, you're going to have the legals better than I am. I'm not, But anyway, on the first page of the report, it basically stated all the allegations. And then, of course, you go through the body of the report, and I quite honestly didn't read the whole thing. A lot of legal jargon, and half of it I didn't understand. And then you get to, the last page or two of it, and these are the findings. And in the findings, they did not find that anything he was accused of, he did not do. In other words, the report basically said that, yes, everything that he was accused of, yes, he was guilty of.
Okay.
But yet, they were not going to act or rule on anything. In other words, nothing. Nothing happened. No fine, no nothing, no removal from office, no nothing. And I thought to myself, who is this board or these people that run this ethics commission? And then what had ended up happening, and you probably understand this better than me, but then within the township, after this report came out, it forced the township to take, okay, we got a backhoe. Now, that backhoe was always owned by the township, operated by township employees for township work, and that's all it ever did. It forced the township to put hourly rates on all equipment. In other words, so theoretically today, I'm a private homeowner. I could call the township and say, hey, I need a backhoe and an operator. and they have an hourly rate chart already figured up, and it forced the township to do this because of this report. You understand where I'm going here with this?
That's interesting, yeah.
And that's what physically happened in the township. Now, it's not that people are calling the township to get their excavating work done. I mean, that part of it just didn't happen. But they had to say, okay, single axle dump truck with driver, X number of dollars per hour. Backhoe with operator, X number of dollars per hour. Roller with operator, you know what I mean? And it forced the township to draw these rate schedules. And I just thought, first off, how could a report tell me everything the man did that was wrong, and then tell me everything that he did was wrong, well, really wasn't, and then go to the township and force him to spend, how much time at the meetings figuring out rate scales for all this equipment that never had to be done before?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it seems interesting. It seems like... By the way, Don, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Dwayne...
Hello, Carl.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Dwayne. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing, buddy? Good.
Dwayne,
So, I don't know, Carl. I don't expect no response or no answers or nothing. I just found that to be extremely unnerving.
Well,
and
it's disconcerting that they make all the findings and determine they're not going to do anything, particularly where things like that are fairly clear. Using township equipment is probably a form of theft. I mean, so, but what do you know?
well, I thought the man should have been removed as supervisor immediately.
Yeah.
I mean,
and even if he was confused about it, it's just problematic. So, but it doesn't surprise me because these state ethic boards and things like that, sometimes are quite often more window dressing than anything else.
Well, I figured after reading that report, that's all that state ethics board is.
So
it can't be anything real.
Don, I got a question for Don now. Has Ebola affected your family yet?
Oh, yeah, it's because they're all Mexican coming across the border. They're transmitting it among everybody. They're spreading
Puerto
around
Rican,
like
Mexican,
wildfire.
wherever they are. Yeah, right.
Yeah, same thing. That's what I had to call bullshit, Carl, when I started hearing people say stuff like that.
Well,
you know what I mean? That's where it gets too fringy, too weird, too crazy, too cuckoo for me to buy into.
Well, I said earlier, I feel bad for the people who believe that somehow Ebola has been created as a crisis to cover up immigration on American borders. First of all, that's a typical American attitude, like everything's about America. Yes, African people are dying to cover up internal American political problems because Obama's from Kenya and he went back and released the virus. I mean, craziness.
That's what I call a conspiracy theory.
Right.
And somebody, it's incomprehensible.
But on the other hand, and I will say this, it is certainly disconcerting that disease can move across borders. On the other hand,
Carl, here's what I think you're not talking about. No, I haven't heard anybody talk about the actual numbers. Like, what actual percentage of the population? I mean, you make it sound like people are just like the whole fucking place is just being wiped out, and that's not really what's happening. It's actually a small percent in these places.
No, it's a very small number. It's a very small number.
Compared to other outbreaks of Ebola in other places, I mean, this is definitely the biggest one, but it's still not like, it's not like polio.
No, the problem is...
It's not huge where it's wiping out populations.
Right, it's not like polio.
I don't think we need to panic just yet.
It's not like polio, because polio and other things like that don't kill so efficiently tend to burn slower.
This virus isn't a very efficient predator. It doesn't spread well.
That's
Ebola.
Ebola's
Like your
problem.
caller was saying.
The problem with Ebola, that's why I said the fact that this one's only 60% fatal is more concerning to me, because it suggests that Ebola may be adapting. I mean, how would we feel if Ebola got a little bit better at spreading, but a little worse at killing, and it only had a 25% death rate, right? I mean, that's the problem, and that's what I worry about. I worry about the fact that as it blossoms into the population, it gathers a foothold, and it starts to learn. And it experiments. It's like have you ever read Michael Crichton, the Andromeda Strain?
I have, actually.
Yeah, it's a great book,
I have the
right?
soundtrack album.
And what does that little space virus do? Right, it learns. Eventually, turns harmless because that's its optimum way to reproduce, right? But it's interesting, isn't it? If Ebola...
Well, I think there's reason to look at it and to be aware of it. And like you're talking about the, like the Black Death and things like that, which is a completely different kind of organism. But,
well,
yeah, and the way it's spread is completely different.
And that's interesting because that sort of plague had a vector, which to use our friend's terminology from earlier, which is absolutely correct. It had a vector, rats and other things, which, of course, in that day and age, people had no idea how disease spread. As a result, they had no ability to sort of look around their world and just discern what they needed to correct in order to slow its spread. So they knew that it could go from person to person, and they knew somehow that rats might be involved in this sort of thing, but they didn't really understand it per se without understanding the disease mechanism, and so they couldn't resolve it. So even the death masks, you ever see the masks that people wore when you dealt with the bodies? It's a death mask that you see with a long hooked nose. So it's a face mask, and the nose comes out, and it's a long piece. That's a death mask.
Right, with the incense at the end, yeah.
Correct. And they would put, because they believe that foul odors were what caused the disease, that you could protect the person from smelling the foul odors, they wouldn't contract it. So when you don't understand the disease mechanism, and you have a disease that moves through a vector that's very common in society, the way fleas on rats move through medieval Europe, it's a problem. It is a real problem because the plague spread a lot of other ways besides, just kissing a plague-infested girl.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting about how Ebola is spreading, because a lot of it is, it's body fluids,
right?
And that's like poo and pee and all the nasty stuff. And how that stuff is getting spread there is like, for example, and I love this one because they're very Christian there, and they have this faith healing belief. And the belief is that they lay hands on the people, and that's how they heal them spiritually by praying to Jesus. And this touching spreads disease.
Yeah, and let me take you one step farther. Let's assume this disease were to make it to India, okay, where many people, and it's particularly a Hindu belief, by the way, like to go to the bathroom outdoors. And so India has a program right now to build several million toilets a year and train people to use toilets because they keep spreading disease by going to the bathroom just wherever they feel like it, which is mainly, I don't know, got kids in the background there, Dwayne. Dwayne, is that you?
Did he get in the Red Bull? Is that what's going on over there, Carl?
I know Dawn doesn't have any kids, that's for sure. All his kids have abandoned him and moved to the North Country or sent him south or something. Exactly sure. But in all seriousness... I left him to be raised by wolves is what I did. Right, exactly. That's what ex-wives are for, my friend. The long and short of it, though, is there they don't go to the bathroom where they have disease issues because people are defecating and urinating in streets, in fields, in playgrounds, wherever they find a spot to go. They don't use toilets. In fact, they don't like the idea of going to the bathroom in the same place multiple times because that's, quote, dirty. It's impure to go to the bathroom in a spot where you've already gone to the bathroom, so you're encouraged to keep spreading it around. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. Imagine a disease like Ebola moves to a country where people are still literally defecating in the streets and the fields and in constant contact. In West here, we like to make fun of some of our people in our society as, quote, dirty, but our overall hygiene here in America is pretty damn good.
I don't know what part of Pennsylvania you're talking about.
I'm talking about the part where most people try to get most of it in the toilet. That's the part of Pennsylvania I'm talking about.
You ever seen an Amish dude? They don't... Please. Hey, Carl, how was your trip out west? I understand you were up in the mountains.
The mountains of Meadville, Pennsylvania. I went to visit my brother, yes. There were no lawnmower races, and the people were very kind. I'm
sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, no, it's fine. All right,
maybe if it only entertains me, that's fine, but, No, I think
here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we know enough about Ebola to know that, A, it's not probably a threat immediately. B, we got to keep a strong eye on it. We need to keep a really strong eye on it because it could become a threat if, in fact, it makes it into this country. Because, and again, it goes to this fear of isolation, this fear of, if you think you have Ebola, are you walking into the local hospital? Well, I don't know. I almost think that's part of the reason why they're putting the word out that there might be a cure, right? Because if you really believe that there's no cure or treatment, you might as well stay at home and secret yourself. But if you believe there might be a cure or treatment, well, hell, I might as well go to the emergency room. Maybe they'll try that new Ebola vaccine on me. So, I don't know.
Your chances of getting it there in Pennsylvania, there in Carlisle, I think are infinitesimal.
Yes, well,
at this point in the game, and
I run with a very urban crowd, so you never know.
Well, yeah, I could.
It's beautiful.
I still wait for the person from we were going to listen from bathroom walls.
Oh yeah, that picture of bathroom wall, that was in Meadville. That was a bathroom wall in Meadville that I put up on Facebook. Yeah, it's very funny actually. I thought
it was pretty good.
Some of the world's greatest poets, right? And in fact, in Zeno's, this great bar up in State College, where I got myself into so much trouble one time by tweeting something. Zeno's has a bar wall or a bathroom wall where people write on it religiously, and there's just tons of funny stuff in there.
Dude, I got an idea for you. You could write a book, do it like a coffee table book of walls of like bars around like Pennsylvania.
Right. Oh, right. Exactly. Like, weird.
How cool would that be?
Like haunted Pennsylvania and weird Pennsylvania. I could do like bar art Pennsylvania, bar bathroom art Pennsylvania.
I think it would be great, and the research would be awesome. I would be willing to volunteer for your team.
Well, I can tell you that the most common theme is for a good time in many men's bathrooms. It says "Call Don Stevens." So I'm just.
That's just because I pee in a lot of them. That's all.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up Rominger Radio for the night, and I appreciate your call. Take care. You've been listening to Rominger Radio with Coral Rominger. We are wrapping up. We've been talking about Ebola. It's a serious topic. And if you listen to the earlier parts of the show, if you just joined us now, you'll understand how serious it really is because we've just been making fun. Oh, we got another caller. We might take one more caller before we go. We'll take one more caller before we go. Caller, you just made it in. You snuck in. What's going on and who are you? Is this Lucinda?
It is Lucinda. How are you?
How did I know? I recognize the number.
You got my number on dial.
I do.
On the list.
Yo. All right, what's going on, my dear?
I don't know. I just want to sneak in a phone call because I always get yelled at when I don't call from Don. So I didn't want Don
well, it's good because Don hung up, so you don't have to actually talk to him. That's always good, too.
Oh, did he hang up?
You won't have to shower now.
Just the mention of it. Well, I really actually didn't have all that much to say. I thought the topic on the Ebola was pretty interesting. I don't know. You get worried about that kind of stuff because you hear about it so much, but it seems like the possibility of it actually happening is so far, but...
It is, but we know it isn't because we know from human history that the swine flu killed tons of people in World War I, and swine flu came back, and President Kennedy was warned about it. We know the avian flu is out there. We know that SARS is out there. We know that with all our modern medicine, we're still not there. We still don't have a tricorder like they do in Star Trek, where you can just wave at a person, determine what's wrong with them, and pretty much take out any biological agent. We're not far from that, by the way. We're not far. I would bet within 20, 25 years. Pretty much there's not going to be a disease we can't cure because we're going to have it all sorted out, what we need to do. But I don't see that.
That would be sweet.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. Of course, my mother said, and she's as old as dirt. My mother said, well, when I was a girl, they said, I know, she's probably not listening, so we can get away with it. But she said, when I was a girl, they said, we're going to have cancer cured. And my mom says, all my life I've watched people die of cancer. And I always think maybe I could get it too and something could happen. And yet, the rhetoric always is, we're going to cure cancer. And now, 50 years later, we're like, whoa, wow, it's a lot more complicated than we thought it was. Because back then we thought, okay, we'll solve it. And it is. It's very complicated. Every turn biology goes, we just keep getting layer after layer after layer of complexity. But on the other hand, our computers are getting stronger, our experimentation, our knowledge. We're now designing drugs to problems instead of just looking for substances and seeing what their effect is. So I'm very ambitious that in the future we will, in fact, conquer viruses and bacterial diseases and cancers very efficiently.
Well, I think with there's always just something evolving, though. I mean, there's always something in some part of the world that we are not familiar with until it's too late,
No, and it's going to have to be. There'll always be people that die because of that. But we're going to get to the point where they can just basically take the new virus or bacteria, isolate it, and in very short order just design something to zap it. The problem...
What's something to do to the Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, but the problem with that is, by the way, the one problem in biology it turns out that everything's recycled, reused, and has 5 purposes. So, for instance, when you take an analgesic, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug such as aspirin, okay, or ibuprofen, it inhibits the COX, Don, not COCK, the COX enzyme, COX-1 enzyme, okay? And then they came along with another drug because there's another enzyme involved with inflammation, the COX-2 enzyme, right? So they developed a class of drugs that inhibit the COX-2 enzyme, which are a little bit more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of them is called Vioxx, right? And it starts causing heart damage. Well, it turns out that the human heart uses the COX or COX-2 enzyme for a different purpose. And so when you create a COX-2 inhibitor, and give it to patients, you do help them with their inflammation, but at the same time you cause damage to the heart tissue. And it's one of these things where, again, there's no particular reason why that's the case, except that human biology tends to recycle a lot of different pathways, and a lot of different metabolic pathways are used different places for different things. And the interactions are very, 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 very nuanced and complex. And so what gets you from A to B might also do C and D, and that's what we never know or never see coming.
Right, and with all the drugs out there, like my father-in-law, he's older. He takes I don't know how many pills. You have one that does this and this, where you have to take another pill to fix that and that,
right.
And so on and so forth.
Right, because a pill that does one thing, that's exactly it, because there's so many metabolic pathways. Human metabolism is just, and any animal's metabolism, biological, is just infinitely complex, and our DNA and the layers and what carries information for what. So, we can sometimes knock out a gene which might give you blue eyes, but it might also be the gene that causes something else to happen, and we don't always know that until, of course, we experiment. And last I checked, you can't experiment on people, at least in this country.
Well, it might be happening somewhere. No, here's my question when you were saying about earlier, just a minute ago. So, say they come up with something that does detect all these diseases and can fix them stuff, then the problem is the population.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why these things happen. In my opinion, obviously, I think, then you have this population, and then
we wouldn't have all these kids with diabetes living today if we didn't cure them by giving them insulin, right? And we wouldn't have all these people with bad eyesight running around if we didn't give them glasses. We wouldn't have all these people with teeth if we didn't. No, but I understand. What I'm saying is we completely sidestep, at least to some extent with our technology, natural selection and or just the results of bad genetics. And so, the Eskimos weren't known for raising kids with birth defects, right? And a lot of African tribes and simple people weren't known for raising kids who had, birth defects, because they simply made a choice that it wasn't worth it, and therefore you didn't grow to adulthood if you had serious trauma or problems, because you weren't allowed to. In this day and age, we have the wealth of resources that allows us to say, okay, we will allow the sick and the infirm to continue to exist and reproduce, and we won't say that they're less than human or less than deserving than anyone else. But throughout human history, that's a choice that seems to be more related to the wealth of society than it does to anything else.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, if you think about those tribes in the early years, however many years ago, it is a human, it is human to... thin out the herd. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean.
It's biology.
The strongest.
Well, someone once said to me that, and I don't remember who said this. I mean, they said it exactly this way, but basically they said the sanctity of human life is proportional to the wealth of the society, and the individual's life expectancy. In other words, if you expect to live a very short period of time, then the value of human life is much lower. If, on the other hand, people can live to a ripe old age, then we have a much higher value on human life. And he was illustrating that, for instance, for the gladiator contests in Rome, right? If you got stabbed at 17 or 20 and killed in the gladiator ring, well, at that age, you'd already watched 3/4 of your friends die of natural causes. So you didn't have, a lot of fear of dying, or let's just say the idea that you would die wasn't necessarily a very big impression on anybody, because everybody was expected to die pretty quickly after they were born.
I didn't think about all that.
Whereas,
well, now we're living so much, everyone's living so much longer, you know.
So listen to that. We'll go to my point, which I have argued this before, and I maintain it to my dying breath, that should science conquer disease? In other words, should we be able to make it so that you will not die of cancer, and you will not die of Ebola, and you will not die of the flu? And we should be able to repair your body to the point where you can live to, say, let's 200 years of age, right? Then the only leading cause of death is going to become accidental death, meaning car accidents and things like that. And I guarantee you, if we solve disease, the disease mechanism and the aging mechanism, I guarantee you the speed limits are going to fall, because people are going to say, why let anybody drive 100 miles an hour, let alone 50 miles an hour, when we could lower the speed limit to 25 miles an hour and the fatal accidents would fall almost to zero, right? If traffic accidents became the only way you could check out, where your life expectancy becomes high enough, then the trade, the economic benefit of driving faster versus driving slower versus life expectancy would cause us to rejigger our equation, and speed limits would fall substantially, I believe. So the day that they can go ahead.
I was going to say every child will live in a bigger bubble.
Right. Well, exactly. Exactly. The day that they could keep you alive forever, but for accidental death, right? Well, then we'd all be very careful.
Oh, my God. I don't know. 200 sounds like a long time.
I don't know. I want to be shot by a jealous husband at 199 now.
I'm sure he's gotten close once or twice that you don't even know about.
All right. I'm getting out of here. It's the end of the show.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night. Hey, right. By the way, nice profile pic. I said that. It was a good one.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I like that one.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. You've been listening to Rominger Radio. This is Carl Rominger. Check us out on Facebook, Carl Rominger, KarlRominger. Or feel free to check in. Feel free to check in at carlrominger.com for all the latest news and information about the show and what the topics are going to be. And we will be back on Sunday at 8 p.m.